How to get and defend or preempt people from ghosting. What is their view of how to make a better hire? We don't just find a great person, but we get them embedded quickly and effectively in our company. From a recruiter who gets to do this thousands of times, whereas a business owner might do this dozens or hundreds of times every year.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Hi, and welcome to The Business Coach. I'm David Finkel, your host. In this podcast, we're going to get the chance to visit with Darrin Carr, head of Carr Talent, a recruiting company that's been working with small to mid-sized companies now for years. Darrin's background comes from working as a senior head of recruiting, head of HR for a large multi-billion-dollar company. He's built his own recruiting company, and he's done it with some fairly cool models where he'll do a combination of success fees and or just straight hourly on the recruiting side. Darrin is somebody we've used now ourselves to hire in the Maui companies. We've had coaching clients of ours use him. In this interview, some of the things that we're going to be talking through that you're going to hear about are how to get and defend or preempt people from ghosting you. I don't know if you've ever had the experience where somebody right after you've hired them doesn't even show up for the first day, or you've set up the interview for them and they don't show for the interview, or 2 weeks into the process, they disappear on you. So we had a really rich conversation about ghosting. I also asked Darrin about what is the inside view of hiring from a recruiter who gets to do this thousands of times, whereas a business owner might do this dozens or hundreds of times every year, probably in the dozens. Darrin and his company do it thousands of times every year. What is their view of how to make a better hire? How do we deal with compressing the timeline in a tight labor market? In the conversation, Darrin even shared some pretty important stats about where we are in the hiring process. We also talk in the interview about how can you make the onboard more successful, so we don't just find a great person, but we get them embedded quickly and effectively in our company. So enjoy the interview. Darrin's a great guy. Here we go. Well, Darrin, welcome to The Business Coach. How are you doing today?
Really well, David. Thank you. Always a delight to speak with you. I'm very happy to be on your podcast.
Well, I appreciate it. So one thing I want to start off here was talking about, we're going to just do a little bit of current stuff. What I mean by that is the labor market and the economy always change. 3 years ago was a certain way. 3 years from now, it'll be a different way. Today, it's a little bit, you have an interesting perspective because you're the one, your company, Carr Talent, does lots and lots of recruiting and hiring for small to mid-sized companies. And as a result of that, you guys talk with thousands and thousands of applicants for various types of positions. You look at the economics, you can see how many people are responding. You get to see lots of stuff. Plus, you pay attention to that. Give us a quick snapshot. What's the state of the labor market right now? What are your thoughts here as a person in a company that does so much hiring and recruiting?
Yeah, good question. And I'll maybe start by clarifying applicants, but also recipients of outreach, because those are kind of like two different buckets. So we get the response from the people who are responding to an ad, but yet we also are getting, we know what's going on, people who are already happily employed. But generally for the United States, the labor market consistently remains very strong and continues to outperform expectations. For instance, last month in March, 300,000 jobs were added. That was over 200 was predicted by the Fed. The month before, 275,000 jobs. There's been so many more than 2 years of consecutive job growth that it's contrary to what a lot of people may think is the case. But unemployment edged lower again, 3.8%. It was 3.9. Even though the labor force participation rate increased substantially. So wages rose, unemployment dipped. The bottom line is the A players, they usually have great jobs and they're usually pretty happy with them. The one thing that has come with these statistics I'm giving you right now with how many jobs are out there and is the effect that it's having on small businesses like mine and and many others like me is things like, ghosting on interviews, ghosting on showing up for the first day of work, very common now, or much more common, ghosting after being on the job for 2 weeks. But it all results in it to be a little bit more of an impact on small businesses, with there being so many jobs. 60% of the small businesses, like mine, those with 250 people or less, can't find the people they need for their position, and that's 10 million jobs total. So it's a robust labor market. There's a lot of jobs available.
Yeah, it's interesting you said something. I'm going to come back to this idea of ghosting, whether it be in the interview stage or you've hired the person and they just didn't show up, or they show up and then all of a sudden 2 days or 2 weeks later they don't come into work. And the cultural norm about giving notice and or being straight is changed. And we'll talk about, perhaps some strategies about how we, as a running a business, can protect ourselves from the absolute frustration and the maddening sense of rage. Maybe I'm putting too strong of words. That's how I feel about it when that happens. But we'll leave that be for a moment. So I want to start off, now that we kind of look at, we're in a tight labor market. We get that. What are some of the dumb mistakes you watch individuals or companies make as they go about hiring? And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Like one of the things I see coaching clients as mistakes they make that we have to actively help them to do it better again and again, which is they go and they hire based off of an acute need. I have to find someone to do X. And they start scrambling to find that person. And they never take the 30 minutes to an hour to really sit down and clean up specifically what's the job to be done, roles, responsibilities. How is it that this person creates the most value? Really getting clean on that so that they can write down how we're going to measure their performance so that they and the company know they're doing good. That first step. And then next from there is to go back and say, hey, who specifically do we need to hire to do this job and produce these results exceptionally well? And how do I take that candidate profile and put it to my 4 to 5 non-negotiable must-haves? And usually, as you know, because you've worked with a lot of our clients that you do recruiting for, we call that the hiring gold standard. They come to you and say, here's the role defined out, here's the candidate profile, including our must-haves. Help us find this person who can do this role exceptionally well. The average person in business, they just go and do it. Oh, I'll know it when I see the person. And as a result, they hire the wrong people for the wrong reasons at the wrong time. And then they say, hiring sucks. So I'm curious for you, what are some of the mistakes? I mean, you get an insider seats. Like I get an insider seat as a business coach. We've got several hundred companies that we work with who hire collectively, thousands of people every year, but I'm not involved with all that. As a coach, I might touch them when they're making just their most important hires, their leadership or management level hires. You get to see a lot more than that. So what are some of the mistakes that you see that we can just put on the table so that our listeners can improve upon that?
Yeah, good question. And I have enjoyed and appreciated in the past when I've been at your many live Maui sessions, which I have gained from both personally and professionally, when I have heard you say something to the effect of, and I totally agree, that 15% of the work of finding someone appropriate for your job and for the role and for the company is done before you ever reach out to a recruiter or put a job posting in. So 100%, I would say rushing the hire is one of the most common mistakes. I would back it up just a little bit and say, make sure this is the right position you're hiring for. And we do have a tool for that. If anyone's interested here, any of my Maui colleagues, I'm happy to pass along. But it basically involves building out, taking your company structure and looking at it like, what do you want that to be, the tree in a year or 3 years and 5 years, and planning out, where you believe you will need the right talent at the right time. And when you've done that enough, do you understand what your next hire is it is certainly laying out all those things that you need, those in top 5 non-negotiables and top 5 nice to haves, and using those and ranking those, which we highly recommend as part of our candidate assessment path, which is a tool we provide our Maui colleagues, and ranking how you would rate each attribute, skill, experience, in that they need to bring to bear for the position to do well. So not only listing them, but ranking them. That will help you later on too when you're ranking particular candidates against each other. This one was a 4 in this category on work, let's say work ethic, and this one was a 3 on experience. This one was a 4 versus a 4. So all that will certainly help out, but a very flushed out, detailed job description that's meaningfully, thoughtfully put together certainly helps. An inaccurate job description is one of the biggest causes of somebody quitting within the first several weeks or a couple months. It's just simply not what the job description said, and there is a lot of discontent involved in there. I have, rushing the hire, just to expound on that, and I have other common mistakes I see, but hiring the first or second person that comes, before them, and they get excited. And some people just like everybody naturally, and that's, a great trait to have as a human. But as an interviewer, we need to be objective. This process, this candidate assessment path, or what we call the hiring blueprint, much the same thing, really is steps to be as objective as possible. And that's what nothing brings clarity like comparison. So we say, don't hire the first or second person, wait for the third or fourth, if you can keep it all moving expeditiously and not having great people fall out of the process. Because the average A player right now on the market, only about 10 business days before they're gone. So you're right. That's one of the most commonly.
Let's stay with what you've got there for a second. I want to dive deeper into a couple of things and unpack some. So you just dropped something. It was a bit of a bomb, and it's a good bomb, right? If there is such a thing, maybe it's a wrong analogy, which is this idea of the timeline on hiring, that based on a tight labor market, where in a looser market, we might have 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks or longer from the point of first serious discussion with a candidate to actual doing the hiring. In today's world, we have to compress that process. And how do we compress that process intelligently such that we still have a good fit with being able to discover who's right for us or wrong with us? So do you notice, I'm curious, with your clients, where that one of the mistakes you might observe is they go too slow on the hiring, they make it take too long, and so that their good candidates disappear on them, and all that's left are the people who don't have other choices.
That's 100% true. That's 100% true. And one of the biggest mistakes in hiring is waiting for the perfect candidate while all the other very good ones fall off. That is 100% true. Yes, that is the case. And so, what we recommend there is to, and I have heard, I know that you folks at Maui deliver some of the same advice we do here. And that is, keep your A players hot, and it's how to reel in your perfect hire without ever making an offer. I know we share similarities in what we advise there, but when you're in contact, from the minute that A candidate, A player, you start to see them emerge after the first or second interview, that you should be in contact with that person every couple of days. And you should be asking questions like, how's it going? What fits do you see? How's the cultural fit? Do you have any concerns? Do you have any questions? Are you talking with any other companies? Oh, you are? Could you do me a personal favor? Would you not accept any offers before you talk to me? I mean, it's impressive how much that works, and they come back to you with that. But 100%, if you draw it out too long, people are gonna drop off without any explanation, and you'll never hear from them again. So you need to have a plan for each of those A players. A calendar anyway, that you're going to be in contact with them every at least 2 days in the process, while you do your 3 to 5 candidate touch points on your way to making sure they're the right candidate.
I love it. So let's keep going on this. So one thing that I've observed if I'm coaching a client, I'll commonly tell them something along the lines of, I'll give 2 kind of coaching tips here, and then this might riff off of anything else that this sparks for you, Darrin. We're just going to kind of bounce back and forth here. So when I'm coaching a client, one tip that I'll give to them is to make sure that in part of your hiring process is to really, it's part looking for and selection, but it's also part sales, where you're selling them on you. And rather than saying the good stuff, here's what I will commonly do. Once I know that they're a candidate that merits this, I'll ask them a question like, Darrin, tell me here, what is it about this role and working with us? You've done your homework. We've had, this is our second conversation. We'll have one more after this before we make our final selection of who we're going to hire. but tell me, based on what you've learned about us, what are your 2 or 3 biggest reasons why you want to be here? Why is this the right home for you? And so like in any sales process, you'll give the answer and then I'll restate it back. So I'm hearing is, did I get that right? And it really helps to root them. The second comment I'll make, and I think this is really important, which is, before I do that second interview, if I've got that first good interview and they're a great candidate, I'll say to them, I'll say, look, you know what? I think that you're likely going to be one of our strong candidates. Our way of doing is we find 3 very strong candidates and we make our choice from those 3. I think that you're likely to be that. Where else are you looking yourself? And then I'll say, if we're second choice for you on any of these pieces, then we don't have the right fit. We're looking for someone who really wants to have a great long-term home with us. And that means we have to be their first choice. So I just want to ask you, at this stage, we've just spent an hour and 12 minutes talking, Darrin. I think I would like to progress you to those final points of that next interview. But before I do that, I just want to ask you, is this a role that you really want to do? I get we still have other things to talk through, and we're not ready to choose you just yet, but you're a strong candidate. And before I progress you, I just want to make sure, is this what you want? Because if it's not, just tell me, no harm, no foul. And I find that those are 2 things that have been effective. What are some other things that you found have been effective in terms of speeding up that point and keeping your best people engaged? You talked about, having multiple touches every few days as one. You've talked about that. How else are we compressing the hiring timeline? Give a few more ideas.
4 major touch points. And I'll review them very briefly. I actually have a guide on this and a video on this for anybody who's interested. But number 1, at the very first question we ask in any interview is along these lines, David. It is, can you tell me, before I even tell you about the job or the role, or the company, let me ask you, what is important to you in a company home? We love to ask that question, number 1, because number 1, it shows we care, the client cares. A lot of people maybe don't, or they don't show the inclination that they have that. Number 2, it shows us right away if core values may align from what they tell us is important to what is important to our client partner. And that's super important. Longevity. We hire for 4 things here: hungry, humble, smart, and good cultural fit. What they tell us on
that was good. That was really good. Say it again. Hungry.
All right. Hungry, humble, smart, and good cultural fit. Hungry. There's a reason the reason they get up and hustle. Could be, but our job is to find out what it is and how strong it is. Humble, they're willing to learn. They are coachable. Smart, lots of kinds of smart. What we want is solution smart. Hey, boss, I have this challenge. I thought it through. Here's 2 solutions. Which do you think I should go with? They've already thought it through. So that's the first step, is we ask what's important to you, and we file that information away. Because later on, when you're presenting the package, not making an offer, but presenting the package, we want to recap. You said this, and this was important to you. Then a little later on, we talked about this, and that. We provide that, and also XYZ. Looks like a pretty good fit to me so far. Does it not to you? That's the first check-in. Then the second check-in was after the first or second interview that I was just mentioning. Hey, you did pretty well. You're rising in the upper tier of candidates. Tell me, what are you seeing as far as fits? Do you have any questions or concerns? Are you speaking with other companies, et cetera? The third step occurs when you are in a situation in which you are really understanding that this may be the person that you want to present the package to. And in that case, we suggest a test close, like you would with a sale. Hey, listen, candidate, you're really doing well here in this process and floating to the top. If we were to make you an offer, would you accept? And then based on their answer, yes, great. If not, then dig in why.
I love it. Keep going. What's number 4? What's the 4th touch point? I'm going to come back and touch on and riff on 2 things you said.
Okay, sure. And I think our internet connection is a little low, so hopefully you can still hear me. But and then the 4th one is that locking in your perfect hire without making an offer, and that is essentially, listen, you can feel very well about the way you've comported yourself. We want to bring you on happy. We feel like you'd be a long-term pillar. It's the offer of presenting the It's the process of presenting the package, I should say. For that reason, we put together this, and this. We really feel like it's going to bring you, happiness for you and your family right now and in the future. Certainly, we can revisit this if it makes sense, etc. The last thing anybody wants here, dear candidate, is a messy back and forth between your current employer or another company. So here's what we're presenting. Dot 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 dot. Monetarily, as importantly, dot 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 dot. A non-monetarily ability to take on more responsibility, make a meaningful impact in the community. All the things that have become a lot of the things that have become more important to people since the pandemic pivot. So those are the four
I love it.
pivotal steps.
So one thing you did, and I want to make sure anyone who's watching or listening to this noticed it, twice you talked about in your touch points about letting the candidate know that he or she, that they're doing really well, that they're impressive, that they're rising to the top. It's the idea of giving them hope about it. Otherwise, they're going to rationalize I should look somewhere else, because they're like you, they're sorting through different opportunities. And so giving them that hope makes them we want to be wanted without, we don't want to lose the being in the chair of the person doing selection, because that forces them to be more in the selling themselves chair and the chair of eagerness, because there's two chairs in any interaction. To put them in the eager chair, I have to be in the chooser or reluctant chair. So I love that. And then something else you said here, you talked about a test close. So let me just give to anyone watching this or listening, here's the way we would coach. If you were a client of ours, here's exactly what we would say to you. Hey, we would say it this way, somewhere at the roughly midpoint or before the 2/3 of the interview process is done, I want to ask 3 questions of them that I think are really important, quote unquote, test closes. And so if I'm doing, 2 interviews, it might be somewhere toward the midpoint of interview 2. And it just goes like this. And Darrin, you'll know this because you've heard us say it all many times, and you've helped us make a lot of hires inside the Maui company. You've helped us find lots of great team members over the years, which I've appreciated. But we'll ask about money, decision makers, and timeline. Hey, Darrin, I know it's still early in this process, but if we do pick you, the role we're thinking is going to be somewhere at a base of somewhere between $80,000 and $90,000 with an on-target earnings with the bonus and commissions of probably closer to 120 to 130. Are we in the right neighborhood with you? Because if we're not in the right neighborhood, I'd rather find that out now while you and we have some really good other choices. So I just talk about neighborhoods, and I do that early, knowing that whatever range I give to you, I better be prepared to come toward the upper part of that range, because no one believes that they're not an A player, even if they're a C or a D player. The second thing we ask about, Darrin, on our side is we ask decision making. So we say something along the lines of, hey, Darrin, just want to ask you, you had mentioned earlier that you have a significant other. How does your significant other, they probably know you really well. What do they think? Do they think this is the right opportunity, or maybe they think that there's a better or something else they should do? Notice, you know this because you know all the employment laws and hiring. I'm never going to ask about their wife, husband, spouse. They have to bring that stuff up, because I'm not going to discriminate based on marital status. But it is perfectly appropriate if I ask all candidates that are far enough along the process, and I can do it generically if they haven't told me, and I can do it specifically if they've shared the information. How does this partner in life look at this? What it does is it preempts them later on coming back and saying, I have to talk with my husband, wife, significant other. And so we ask that there, and we'll say, how does he or she feel about this? Because they're sitting in the selection chair, 99 out of 100 times they say, oh, they think this is the right opportunity. Really? What was the reason for why he said that, do you feel? Why did she feel that way? It's part of the sales process. The third thing that we do is we ask about timeline, because I don't know about you, Darrin, but I've been so frustrated where I find the right person, nowhere along the lines where they mention anything. I get them going, and all of a sudden I say, great, let's get you started. And they say, whoa. I've been planning this 4-week vacation now for the last 7 years of my life, and I can't start, I can't start on January 1. I can't start until, May 1st. I know I'm making a big caricature exaggeration. And so we can preempt that by saying, look, Darrin, if we do end up selecting you, what does it look like to get you started? Like, for example, let's say we pick you, today is Tuesday, let's say we pick you on Friday. What does it look like, the timeline to get you started? And I just bring it up, and almost everyone's going to say, immediately to, I need to give 2 weeks period of notice. No one ever says, well, I have this dream vacation. Every once in a while, they might say, I have a family event for a long weekend I'm going to do. I like uncovering that right away. And what it also does is it reduces the amount of ghosting that I get. because I'm embedding them in this future pacing of what would it be like if we were to do that. What are comments that sparks for you? Because again, I know our thinking on hiring is very similar.
Yeah, no, only that I would 100% agree. And we do those steps in a little bit of different way, but particularly the age-old block you for a while until you can go off and get a better offer from your current company or another company is, I need to talk to my significant other, or so we do the same thing. Is there anybody in your life is a good way to put it.
I love it.
Yeah, that you thought you think that you'll want to consider talk to before you consider accepting this job, should we come to that point. Is that something you think you'll feel like you'll be able to take care of before we get to Friday when we hope to make our final decision?
I love it. I love it. Is there anybody in your life? I just wrote that down. I've got now 2.5 pages of notes here, which is good stuff. Let's do this here. As a recruiter, your company has an interesting perspective on this. And so here's what I want to ask you. The next piece is, when you are, well, actually, let me just, first of all, let's even step back. So, I had mentioned this in the introduction, that your company is also a coaching client of Maui Mastermind, which is fantastic. And so one of the things I find as a client, they get the best result when they are willing to hear outside input from someone who's got a deep skill set or an expertise or experience in an area. And I guess I'll ask you, what for you, how has it been for you and in your team for them taking ideas from coaching and actually embracing and putting them to practice? How has that been getting your team and you to be able to do that? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you should ask, because we have the most phenomenal Maui coach. And I commonly will have team members meet individually with me, meet with me, or sometimes even individually with her. And I feel like it's part of the hiring process in identifying those who are our number 3 core value is embrace continuous improvement. So there are questions that we like to ask around that. What's the last book, podcast, etc. that you consumed? How did it affect your life? So I'm mentioning to you that the process by which we get people in here who are open to coaching, or hopefully are, usually almost always are. And so here at Carr Talent, we recognize the value of a good coaching program, and especially when you have a brilliant coach like we do. So really the proof is in the pudding with what she has been able to accomplish for us and the initiatives that that she has suggested or worked through with us. And so because we've shown the results to our crew, look, we listened to her. This came from this coaching source. Isn't this amazing? We'd like you to participate. That's how we just provide a little bit of testimonial, a little bit of proof. Not that we need it. I mean, they trust us anyway, but it's nice to to put some proof behind the pudding in terms of what kind of coaching can be available to them.
So here's where I'm leading to that part. So, the ability to take input. I'm hoping now that someone watching and listening now is going to be more open to take your input as someone who plays the recruiting role. So I've watched that recruiters can do something that the average business person just can't do. So one thing that a recruiter can do that a business person can't do as effectively is they can go outbound. They can actually go to people who have existing work and cherry pick who might be interested. And if I call up, Sarah Smith, who is really well respected in our industry, maybe she works for a competitor or a supplier or a vendor, and I reach out to Sarah Smith, it doesn't have the same result than if Darrin or Carolyn or one of your other team members reaches out to this person and they says, hey, I've got a client who I'm recruiting for that has this type of opportunity. Is this something you're open for? Just take a moment here. Give me your insight about that, because most people, the only way they can think of hiring is they might look for referral hiring, or they'll place ads and they'll get an inbound pool, but they miss out on the opportunity to go outbound, and they're just not very effective with it, where a recruiter can actually do that with a little bit of impunity. Comment about that?
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the biggest opportunities with us. That's one of the most values we provide, is we are not relying upon. And by the way, you need to make sure when you're selecting a recruiter, that how much outbound they do. because the dirty little secret of a lot of recruiting agencies, they just post ads like you can on Indeed, and that's their candidate pool. And who knows why? I mean, I'm sure we know in this day and age, there are reasons why people are unemployed. With the churn that's we've seen in the last few years. And so we want to not discriminate there and to be careful about the way we ask about that. But you are, in large part, if you don't pay the very big dollars for the very big databases where we can gather a bunch of great looking profiles in one folder and hit one button and hit send to all of them. I mean, definitely having the efficiencies. And then, we've got the time, the tools, the expertise. That's unfortunately what limits some of our partners, our client partners, is they don't have that, very expensive software, nor the time to scan through 300 or 400 profiles a day. The opportunity cost there alone is a lot, but there are ways that companies can do some outreach, but that I can mention, but they are a bit more limited than what we can do.
Yeah, well, let's stay with it. So I loved your comment, the dirty little secret that they're going to be doing, some companies are going to be doing the same type of sourcing that you can. Let's come back to it for a moment here. What if you had 1 or 2 tips, coaching suggestions to help a company more effectively gather a great candidate pool? What 1 or 2 coaching suggestions would you give to a business person to help them gather the best candidate pool?
Yeah, if they're not going to be using a recruiter, and first of all, if they are, to vet that recruiter and ask for testimonials and ask for their process and ask for people they can call. I get that occasionally, and well, we have testimonials, but I occasionally gather, people who are happy with us and that can call. But in some where people can look outside of a recruiter, really, it's always, ABR, always be recruiting. It's really everywhere, all around you at all times. So you're not forced to one jump rush at the end when you need somebody, but conferences, business communities, masterminds, asking your colleagues, hey, listen, we're thinking about hiring a salesperson. Is there anybody you might know or might know anybody? And that's the question you need to ask is if you're not interested, do you know if anybody else is interested? Business partnerships, affiliations, social media, referral programs you've mentioned. What I might mention also too is exterior referral programs. I don't know why you might not offer $1,000 for anyone at all. It doesn't have to be in your company, outside your company that refers you to a candidate that you end up hiring. It's pretty cost efficient in that way. Higher education, schools around you, getting in touch with the people with the job boards there. Same with community connections and trade groups. Holding hiring events. There are ones in person, but there are also virtual hiring events that can be even followed up with 3 or 4 or 5 minute interviews after. Oh, you're interested after you heard me talk about the company for half an hour? Well, hey, we're just slotted here in the next hour and a half, and you can pop back on and we can chat. And then candidates you've just hired. Who else do you know? You're great. We really appreciate what you've done for us. Who else do you know that's like you?
You can't see it here. I've got all 5. I'm going to come back to it. I love ABR, always be recruiting. This idea that how can I start building those relationships, even if I don't have the position, just if there's good quality people. I was coaching one of our clients that runs a manufacturing wholesaling business in aerospace. And I was, his key hire is someone who plays a role of a nurturing base account management sales process where it's very relational. The person has to be very engaging, but it doesn't require a lot of technical skill. It doesn't require a lot of sales skills. And I asked him, I said, where did you find your best people? And he said, well, if I look at my best 3 salespeople, they all came from hospitality, restaurants. They worked as a server or they worked at a front desk of a hotel playing that role. And I just laughed. I said, well, how often do you and your wife, Nikki, go out to dinner? The next time you find a great waiter or waitress, get their contact information, whether you have the position now, start doing it. So I love that ABR. 2, you said exterior referral programs. I love that. We do internal, but it never occurred to me to go external and be willing to pay, right? It's much more cost effective, like you said. I loved your hiring events in person online, and I love, if it's a type of position where I can hire someone out of school or trade organization or some kind of professional organization, those relationships. I know for a lot of the companies we work with that there might be a trade school nearby or a community college that they have a deep relationship with, or a university or one of the law firms. They have a really good relationship with a particular law program, and he probably picks up 2 or 3 attorneys a year from that program. I loved it. And then you also said the internal referral program. Hey, we just hired you. Who else do you know? That's great. Just keeping an eye on the clock and time-wise, here's what I want to ask next. I think this is important. Um, when we talked before about ghosting, I think this is topical and relevant, wherein, I have a great candidate, the interview is set for Tuesday at noon, and they don't show. Or I have a great candidate, I've actually hired them, they don't show for day one, or they show for the first 2 weeks and disappear. So what are some of the ways we can preempt that or defend against it? Like I've given a couple here. Like one of the ways is in that interview process, asking about things like, why it is they want the position and how it fits their life and what does their other important people in their life feel about this opportunity relative to the things they're looking at, and talking about the money early and the timeline for hiring. I've got a few more I want to share, but I'm curious, what are some of the ideas you have to combat that massively frustrating trend, which I think this is a bad cultural trend, and I'm putting a value to it. Maybe it's unfair, about ghosting. What are your thoughts about how we can protect against that or defend against that?
Yeah, well, I've given the 4 areas in which I think, well, I've given a few suggestions about what can be done before the hire. I do have a guide on what to do after the hire as well. I would take care of, like I said, to be contacting the people who was hired on, every couple of days during their 2 week time period that they've put in notice. Get all the important paperwork done. Something I like to do, I don't do it all the time, but what I will do is like, hey, congratulations on this position. This is really a great fit here. In celebration, I'd like you to take you and a significant other, someone from your family, anyone that's special to you, out to a dinner to celebrate. I mean, that's how great we think this is, and please, expense the charge back to us. So any important paperwork, any their calendar upcoming, if you've got an onboarding calendar, and certainly here's another big area of improvement for a lot of companies is their onboarding program. And it starts as when that person's hired and not necessarily the first day they show up on site, so that they already feel involved. They're filling out benefits papers. They see their calendar. Maybe there's a gift basket. I know some companies do that. It's quite nice. But it is just intertwining those people as much as possible into the company before those 2 weeks come up and they may or may not show up.
I love it. One of our clients that I work with, they gave their person early on business cards. They rushed out the first 100 business cards just so the person started seeing themselves this way.
Mm.
I loved your idea here. So the celebratory dinner, that's great. What are some of your tips after the point of hire? So we've got the celebratory dinner, we've got the pre-involvement before they show up. What about the onboard? What are some suggestions you have for the onboard briefly?
Well, I think that first of all, it's got to be, I think, very specific and day to day and outcomes needed. You're going to study, you're going to do this today. At the end of the day, we like to be able to do this. At the end of the week, we'd like you to be able to do this. So it is just very sketched out. It's very stepped out. They feel like it's organized. It's going to be different for every company. But like I said, we do have a brief course that we have put together that we're providing free for folks that has like a lot of little tips. But those would be my main ones. They really just have it stepped out, be thorough, and have check marks where they can say, did this, know this, got this, I'm in, everything's good.
I love it. Hang on one second here. Did this, know this, I'm good. So you talk about there the onboard, and I loved your idea. Hey, at the end of this day, at the end of this training, at the end of this week, here's what you'll be able to do. You'll be able to do X, Y, and Z. I like that. Forgetting the onboarding part from just a training perspective. I mean, I've been training now for 30 years, and that's really good just technique about, hey, let me frame this at the end of this training, at the end of this day, at the end of this meal, here's what I want you to be able to do, to know. I think that's fantastic. We talk about the first hour, the first day, the first week, the first month, the first 90 days. And just having given that some thought, and I think your comment about the pre-involvement, I really like that. Whether it be the gift basket idea or the dinner or the business cards, those are all really good. Two more things that I found that have been really helpful for the ghosting side. When I'm evaluating candidates, I'm curious, as a recruiter, you probably have seen more resumes than I've seen. I don't know, I've seen several thousand at least in my career. You probably are in the tens of thousands, and they probably all look the same at this point into different categories. But one thing I look for in the resume myself is, what's the pattern of job history? And I always look at with a little bit of, it's a little minor warning flag when I see them put down really non-specific things on their resume in terms of timeline. In 2012 to 2014, I worked here. In 2015 to 2017, I worked there. I want to know the dates with that part. I don't mind there being some gaps in there if the gaps are intelligently and reasonably there. But when they have it perfectly seamlessly overlap, I wonder about that. And if there's lots of radical change, past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior. I notice from that part. I'm curious what else comes to you that you might even be able to spot in the interview process that would give indication that you should get this person out quickly, that they're probably not the one you want to invest energy on.
Yeah, a little bit of a tip that similar to what you're doing is to help me identify the gaps. To the right-hand side of each job, I will put how long they were there, 1.2 years, 9 months, 2.2 years. Then I can kind of see, I can get the trend. And if it's 1.2, 9, 8, 7, then I know I got to really dig in, at least give them a chance to explain why the short tenures in the position. So I look for those. I do like it when people explain why they've been out of the sales force for a while. It could be a personal situation. And like I said, the last few years have showed some tumult in jobs. So we do want to dig in and find out why that is. But some other, aside from gaps, what we need to see, what I don't like to see is lack of any metrics. In my opinion, the first 3 bullets can be what they did, and the last 2 should be what they accomplished. Sales went up 22.8% in the fourth quarter. Rep of the year in 2022. I need to see those things. So that's what we look for: specific metrics or accomplishments, track records of increased responsibility. I'm not saying it's a red flag if you don't see it, but it's certainly a green flag if you see within the same company there's 3 tiers. Promoted, promoted, promoted. Love to see that. They've taken on more. They want it. They can handle it. It just shows that someone gave them the chance and they made the most of it.
Darrin, you shared some really great ideas here. I love it. So at this point, how can someone get a hold of you with this part? And just again, to let anyone know, we've used Darrin. He's, I don't know, at this point, probably 8 or 12 of the team members we have, his company has recruited for over the last 5-ish years. He's recruited for clients of ours. And I'll put out there, whether you're doing it yourself, I tell people all the time, look, you're not going to have a perfect track record on hiring. If you can get yourself 50, 60% success rate, you're doing fairly well. 70% is outstanding, which means you're still going to have 1 out of 3 hires be bad, even if you're doing it exceptionally well. You're not going to have that hire work out all the time. And if I look at my past track record and I see that it's 1 out of 3, I can definitely improve on that, but I'm going after that 50, 60%, trending toward the 70% success on the hiring side. So I know you've done lots of hiring for various clients of ours, which we've appreciated. They've all given good feedback. So I guess, how can someone get a hold of you if they want to find out more or to get your input on how to make a hire? How do they get hold of you, Darrin?
Yeah, and 2 things. First, would not be here without my partnership and my membership to Maui. I cannot say how much
Appreciate
it has
that.
multiplied and really made us so much more solid and professionalized. And so I can't recommend the Maui coaching program enough. And so to get a hold of us, it's simply cartalent.com, Carr Talent, CarrTalent.com, or Darrin, DARRIN, at cartalent.com, 2 R's in Carr. But yeah, happy to help with any of we have a ton of full-on complete guides. We share them with all of our Maui brethren, regardless. So you just let us know what you need. We've got a tool for it, and we're happy to share if anybody wants to reach out.
I really appreciate that, Darrin. Thank you for sharing the last 45 minutes of your life with us. We really value the expertise on the hiring and the recruiting side that you bring. Thank you, Darrin.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.